We set a wooden cross on fire during Sunday Mass, laughing as the flames climbed into the night sky. But why did every one of us suddenly collapse to one knee the moment the fire touched the wood? My name is Karim, and I am 32 years old. 3 weeks ago, I helped burn a wooden cross during a church service. When the flames touched the wood, I felt proud. But seconds later, I was on one knee in front of that same burning cross, shaking so hard I could barely breathe. I still don't fully understand why. The night air was cold when it happened. The kind of cold that makes your breath turn white in front of your face. I remember the smell of smoke, the sound of people crying, and the strange feeling that something bigger than me was watching. But to understand that moment, you need to know who I was before that night. I grew up in a small town in northern Jordan. The streets were narrow and dusty, lined with 10 stone houses that held heat during the day and cold during the night. My father was a teacher at our local mosque. People respected him. When he walked through the market, shop owners greeted him with smiles and lowered voices. He taught boys how to read the Quran. That meant from the time I could walk, my life was tied to faith. Every morning my father woke me before the sun. The sky outside our window would still be dark blue. The air smelled like sand and cool stone. "Wake up, Karim," he would say softly. I would rub my eyes and follow him to the prayer mat. My knees would press into the woven fabric as we bowed toward Mecca. My father's voice would fill the room as he recited verses from the Quran. His voice was calm and steady, like water moving over smooth rocks. When I was young, I didn't question anything. Faith was simply part of breathing. At school, the other boys and I studied the Quran every afternoon. We sat cross-legged on the floor while our teacher corrected our recitation. If we made mistakes, we repeated the verse again and again until it sounded perfect. By the time I was 12, I had memorized most of the book. The elders in our mosque would smile at my father and say, "Your son will be strong for Islam." Those words meant everything to me. I wanted to be strong. I wanted to defend my faith. As I grew older, I heard more talk about Christianity. In the sermons, some teachers said Christians had changed God's message. They said the cross was proof of that mistake. I believed them. In my mind, the cross was a symbol of something false. Years later, I moved to Europe for work. I found a job in a shipping company in a busy city filled with tall gray buildings and crowded streets. People from many countries lived there. Different languages filled the air at train stations and markets, but one thing stood out everywhere I looked: crosses. They hung above church doors. They stood on tall towers above the city squares. Some people even wore them around their necks. At first, I ignored them, but over time they began to bother me. Each time I saw one, I remembered what I had been taught, that it was a sign of a message that had gone wrong. I began spending time with a small group of Muslim men in the city. We met at a cafe near the river after evening prayer. The cafe smelled like coffee and a sweet smoke from the shisha pipes. Thus, we talked about many things: work, family, faith. One night, the talk turned towards the churches in the city. "There are crosses everywhere," one of the men said, shaking his head. Another man leaned forward across the table. "They spread lies about God," he said quietly. The words hung in the air. I remember feeling heat rise in my chest, the same feeling I used to get when someone mocked Islam back home. It felt like anger, but also like duty. The man across from me tapped his finger on the table. "If we truly love God," he said, "should we stay silent?" The cafe was loud, but our table had grown quiet. I stared down at my cup of coffee. Part of me knew we were stepping into dangerous thinking, but another part of me felt proud, like we were defenders of truth. Days later, one of the men showed us a video on his phone. It showed a church in our city holding an outdoor evening mass. Candles glowed around a small stage. The people stood singing. In the center stood a tall wooden cross. The camera moved closer to the cross. Someone beside me muttered, "That symbol is everywhere." Another man leaned closer to the screen. "Imagine if it wasn't," he said. No one laughed. The idea settled slowly into the room. I remember the way my heart beat faster as we talked about it, not because I was afraid, because I believed we were doing something righteous. The plan formed over the next few days. Now, we would go to the church during evening mass. We would take the cross outside and we would burn it, not to hurt anyone. At least that's what we told ourselves. We just wanted to show that their symbol had no power. The night we chose was a Sunday. The air was cold enough to make the sidewalks shine with frost. Streetlights reflected on the pavement as we walked through the quiet streets. There were 5 of us. One man carried a small plastic bottle filled with gasoline. Another had a lighter in his pocket. I remember the sound of our shoes on the stone sidewalk, the smell of rain in the air. As we turned the corner, we could already hear music coming from inside the church. Soft singing, voices rising and falling together, warm light spilled through the open doors. For a moment, I slowed my steps. Something about the sound felt peaceful, but the man beside me nudged my shoulder. "Come on," he said. I nodded and walked forward. Inside, the rows of wooden benches filled the room. Candles flickered along the walls. Their small flames moved gently in the air. People stood close together, singing a hymn. At the front of the church stood the cross. It was tall, maybe 8 feet high. The wood looked dark and worn, like it had been touched by many hands over many years. That was the moment the tension inside my chest grew stronger. I reminded myself why we were there: defend the truth. We walked down the center aisle, but at first no one noticed us. Then one of the men reached the front and grabbed the cross. The singing stopped. The silence that followed was so sudden it felt heavy. People turned in their seats. A woman gasped. A priest stepped forward quickly. "Please stop," he said. His voice was calm but worried. I ignored him. Together we lifted the cross. It was heavier than I expected. The wood pressed hard against my palms as we carried it toward the door. People followed us outside into the courtyard. The cold air hit my face like a splash of water. Streetlights lit the stone ground in pale yellow circles. The man with the gasoline stepped forward. He poured it slowly over the wood. The smell filled the air instantly, sharp and strong. Someone behind us began praying out loud. I remember feeling a strange mix of pride and excitement. This was the moment. The man beside me handed me the lighter. The metal felt cold in my hand. I flicked the wheel once. The flame appeared, small, bright. For a second, my hand trembled. I told myself it was just the cold. Then I lowered the flame to the gasoline-soaked wood. The fire jumped up instantly. Bright orange flames raised across the cross. People cried out behind us. The wood cracked and popped as it burned. And then something happened that none of us expected. One of the men beside me suddenly dropped to one knee, not slowly, like his legs had given out. Another man fell the same way, then another. I turned toward them in shock. "What are you doing?" I shouted, but they weren't looking at me. They were staring at the burning cross. Their faces looked pale under the street lights. My heart began pounding harder. Then a strange pressure filled my chest. My legs felt weak. Before I could stop myself, I fell to one knee too, right there in front of the burning cross. And in that moment, as the flames climbed higher into the night sky, one terrifying thought filled my mind. What if the cross we tried to destroy was about to reveal a power we had never believed was real? The night air felt thick as we ran down the narrow street. My boots struck the wet ground with dull thuds, and each step echoed between the tall stone walls around us. The church stood at the end of the block, its doors wide open, warm light spilling out onto the dark pavement. I could hear soft singing from inside, calm voices, slow voices. The sound made my jaw tighten. Adele walked beside me, gripping the wooden beam we carried between us. The cross lay on our shoulders like a heavy log. It was taller than both of us, rough and splintered. My hands burned where the wood scraped my palms. Behind us, the others followed close, 5 men moving fast, their breath loud in the cold air. "Quick," Adele whispered, "before they finish." We reached the church steps. The stone was worn smooth from many feet. I could smell candles even before we stepped inside. Sweet wax, old wood, dust. The singing grew louder. I pushed the door wide. Inside, rows of people sat quietly on wooden benches. Many held small books in their hands. At the front stood a priest in white robes. A large cross hung above him on the wall. For 1 second, no one moved. Then a woman gasped. Adele dropped his end of the cross onto the floor with a loud crack. I let go too. The sound echoed through the church like thunder. Heads turned, eyes widened. The priest froze mid-sentence. "We came to show you the truth," one of our men shouted. The words bounced off the high ceiling. Fear spread across the room like wind across water. A child began to cry. Someone stood up but did not move closer. I stepped forward. My chest felt tight, but I forced my face to stay hard. "We warned you," Adele said loudly. "Stop this worship of a cross." He kicked the wooden beam across the stone floor. It scraped loudly. The cross we carried slid to the center aisle. For a moment the room was so quiet I could hear the small flicker of candles burning. Then one of the older men from our group pulled a small bottle from his coat. I knew what was inside. The sharp smell reached my nose before he even opened it. Gasoline. My heart beat faster. He poured the liquid across the wood. It ran down the beam and spread into dark stains on the floor. Some people in the benches began whispering prayers. I could hear the soft word Jesus again and again. The sound annoyed me. "Stop!" I snapped. "Your prayers cannot help you." Adil struck a lighter. The tiny flame glowed orange in the dim church. For 1 second he held it near his face. The fire danced in his eyes. Then he dropped it. The gasoline caught with a loud whoosh. Flames ran across the wood like wild animals. Orange and yellow light burst upward. Heat pushed against my face. Someone screamed. The burning cross crackled loudly. Smoke rose toward the tall ceiling, where I felt a strange rush inside my chest. Power. Control. "This is your symbol," Adil shouted. "Look at it now." The priest stepped forward slowly. His hands were raised, but his voice was calm. "Please," he said, "there are children here." His voice was soft but clear. For some reason, it made me uneasy. "Take your people out," I replied. before the smoke fills the room. The fire kept growing. The flames licked higher, reaching almost to my waist. The church filled with flickering orange light. My shadows danced across the walls, but the priest did not move away. Instead, he looked directly at me. His eyes were steady, not angry, not afraid, just sad. "You do not know what you are doing," he said quietly. Something about those words made my stomach twist. Adil laughed loudly. "We know exactly what we are doing." The people in the benches began standing, slowly backing away from the smoke. Some covered their mouths, others held their children close, yet many kept praying. Soft voices, whispers, the sound filled the room. I felt irritation rise inside me again. "Enough!" I shouted. I stepped closer to the burning cross. The heat grew stronger. My skin felt tight. I lifted my boot and kicked the burning wood. Sparks flew into the air. Then something strange happened. A sharp pain shot through my chest. I stopped moving. At first I thought it was just the smoke. I coughed once and rubbed my throat. But the pain did not go away. It spread from my chest to my arms to my legs. I tried to take a step back. My knee shook. The church suddenly felt too bright, too loud. The flames crackled like thunder in my ears. "Are you okay?" Adil asked beside me. I'm fine," I muttered. But I wasn't. The floor seemed to tilt under my feet. My heart pounded so hard it felt like a drum inside my chest. Then the priest spoke again. His voice rose above the chaos. "Lord Jesus, have mercy." The words cut through the smoke. At that exact moment, my leg gave out. My body dropped suddenly. My right knee slammed onto the stone floor. Pain shot up my leg, but I barely felt it, because something else filled my mind. A deep weight, like someone unseen, had pushed me down. I tried to stand. My other knee bent too. Now I was kneeling, right in front of the burning cross. My breathing grew fast. I looked up at Adil. His face had turned pale. "What are you doing?" he whispered. I don't know," I said. I tried to stand again, but my legs would not move. The heat from the flames touched my face. The smoke curled into the air above me. Behind me, I heard gasps. The people in the church had stopped moving. All eyes were on me. A strange silence filled the room. Then suddenly another sound echoed beside me. A heavy thud. I turned my head. One of our men had dropped to his knees too. His eyes were wide with fear. "What is happening?" he whispered. Another man staggered. Then he fell to one knee as well. My chest tightened again. The priest slowly stepped closer. The fire still burned between us, yet he looked calm, almost peaceful. And as he stared at us kneeling before the burning cross, one question began pounding inside my mind like a hammer. Why couldn't I stand up? The heat from the fire pushed against my face. My eyes watered from the smoke, but I could not look away from the burning wood in front of me. The flames moved fast, licking the dark beams of the cross. The small pieces of ash floated in the air like black snow. My knees pressed hard against the cold stone floor. I tried again to stand. My legs did not move. Panic rose in my chest like a rising wave. I pushed my hands against the ground and forced my body upward, but the moment I lifted even a little, a sharp pain shot through my chest again. My strength vanished, my arms shook, and I fell back down. Another man beside me groaned. "I cannot move," he whispered. His voice trembled. Adil stepped closer to us, his boots scraping the stone. His face looked pale under the orange light from the fire. "Get up!" he said sharply. None of us moved. I said, get up! His voice echoed through the church. Still, my body would not obey me. My heart pounded harder. Sweat ran down my neck, even though the air around me felt cold beyond the fire's heat. I am trying, I said, my voice low. But the truth was worse. It felt like an invisible weight pressed on my shoulders. Not heavy like a man pushing me down, heavier, deeper, like the air itself had become thick around my body. Behind me, the people in the benches watched in silence. Some still held their small books. Some held hands with the person next to them. The priest walked slowly down the aisle toward us. His steps were calm. He stopped a few feet from the burning cross. The firelight moved across his face. You feel it, don't you? He said quietly. His words made my stomach twist. Feel what? Adil snapped. The priest did not look at him. His eyes stayed on me. The weight, he said softly. My throat went dry, because he was right. It felt exactly like a weight, but not one I could see. One of the men beside me began breathing fast. No, he whispered. No, no, no. His hands shook. Another man clutched his chest like he could not breathe. The priest raised one hand slowly. Lord Jesus, he said, his voice calm but strong. Show them mercy. The words filled the room. For a moment, the crackling fire was the only sound. Then something strange happened. The pain in my chest changed. It did not grow worse. It grew quiet, not gone, but softer, like a storm moving farther away. My breathing slowed. I blinked and looked up. The flames still burned bright, but the smoke above them twisted in a strange way. It curled upward in thin lines, almost like fingers reaching toward the ceiling. The air felt different, still, heavy. Adil stepped closer again. What did you do to them? He demanded. The priest shook his head slowly. I did nothing, he said. Adil pointed at me. Then why are they kneeling? No one answered. My eyes drifted back to the burning cross. The flame had begun to shrink. The wood was turning black and red with heat. As I stared at it, a strange feeling rose inside my chest. Not anger, not fear, something else, something I did not understand. A deep sadness. My throat tightened. Images flashed through my mind. The cross, the prayers, the quiet faces of the people sitting in the church. Then the words of the priest returned to my head. You do not know what you are doing. My chest hurt again, but this time it was not from pain. It felt like something inside me was breaking open. Beside me, the man who had been whispering suddenly began to cry, soft at first, then louder. I did not mean this, he said between breaths. I did not know. Adil turned toward him in shock. Stop that, he barked. But the man kept crying. The priest stepped closer to the fire. The flames reflected in his eyes. Sometimes, he said slowly, a man must fall before he can see. His words made my heart beat faster again. I tried once more to stand. This time, my body lifted slightly. But the moment my foot left the floor, a sudden force pulled me down again. My knee struck the stone with a loud crack. Pain shot up my leg. I gasped. The priest watched me quietly. Why can't I stand? I asked. My voice sounded weak. For a long moment, he did not answer. Then he spoke. Because pride stands tall, he said softly. But truth makes a man kneel. The church grew silent again. Even the crying man beside me stopped. My eyes drifted back to the cross. The flames were almost gone now. Only red embers glowed along the black wood. Smoke curled slowly upward. The room smelled of ash and melted wax. And as I knelt there, staring at the burned cross we had come to destroy, one terrifying thought rose inside my mind. What if something greater than us had forced us to kneel? The last flames died slowly. Small red lines crawled across the black wood of the cross like tiny snakes of light. The smoke rose in thin gray ribbons toward the tall ceiling. The church smelled like ash and warm wax. My knees still pressed hard against the cold stone floor, and the strange weight on my body had not left. I tried again to stand. My muscles tightened. My hands pushed against the ground. My leg lifted a few inches. Then the weight returned stronger. My knee slammed back down. The sound echoed through the quiet church. A cold wave of fear moved through my chest. Adil stared at me with wide eyes. He had stopped shouting. The anger on his face had faded, replaced by something else. Confusion, fear. "What is wrong with you?" he asked. "I do not know," I said. My voice shook. Beside me, the man who had been crying wiped his face with both hands. His shoulders still trembled. "I feel something," he whispered. The priest stood only a few steps away now. The firelight had faded, but the candles along the walls gave a soft glow to the room. Their light moved gently across the wooden benches and the pale faces of the people watching us. No one was shouting, no one was running. They were only watching. Some were praying quietly. The priest looked down at us. His face held no anger, only deep calm. "You came here to break a symbol," he said softly, "but something broke inside you instead." His words felt like a knife sliding slowly into my chest. I turned my eyes away. "I do not believe in your cross," I said quickly. The priest nodded slowly. "Maybe not," he replied. Then he pointed gently toward the burned wood in front of us. "But look where you are." I followed his hand. The black cross lay only 3 feet in front of me. The center beam was cracked from the fire. Thin smoke still drifted from the wood. I realized something that made my stomach tighten. We had come to burn the cross. Yet now we were kneeling before it. My heart began to pound again. The priest spoke once more. "Sometimes a man fights the truth so hard that his own body must stop him." Adil shook his head. "This is a trick," he said quickly. "You did something to them." The priest calmly shook his head again. "I have done nothing." Adil looked around the church as if searching for some hidden answer. His breathing had grown fast. "This is not possible," he muttered. One of our men suddenly spoke in a weak voice. "I see something." Everyone turned toward him. He was staring at the burned cross with wide eyes. "What do you see?" Adil asked. The man swallowed hard. I do not know how to say it." His voice trembled. "It is like light." I stared at the cross again. At first I saw nothing, only black wood, gray smoke, red embers fading into darkness. But then my eyes focused on the center where the 2 beams crossed. For a brief second the smoke twisted in a strange shape. It moved slowly, almost like it was forming something. My breath caught in my throat. The shape looked like a man, just for a moment. Then it vanished. I blinked quickly. "Did you see that?" the man beside me whispered. I did not answer. My chest felt tight again. Adil stepped closer to the cross. "There is nothing there," he said, but his voice did not sound strong anymore. The priest lifted his eyes toward the ceiling. His lips moved in quiet prayer. The church felt different now, still, heavy, almost like the air itself was watching us. My hands began to shake. I looked down at the floor. The stone beneath my knees had grown warm from the fire. Small black pieces of ash lay scattered around me. Suddenly, a memory rushed into my mind. When I was a boy, my father once told me something, but he said pride makes a man blind. At the time I laughed, now the words felt different. The priest slowly knelt down in front of us. He lowered himself onto one knee. Now we were face to face. His eyes were calm. "Tell me your name," he said gently. For a moment I did not answer. Then the words slipped out. "My name is Samir. I am 31. The priest nodded. "Samir," he said softly, "do you know why your knees touched the ground tonight?" My throat felt tight. "No." He waited. The silence stretched long. Then he spoke again. "Because every heart must bow to truth one day." His words echoed quietly inside my mind. Behind me, I heard one of the church members begin to cry softly. Another whispered a prayer. The room felt full of something I could not explain. Something strong, something alive. My eyes returned once more to the burned cross. The smoke had almost faded now. Only thin lines curled upward into the dark space above. But as I stared at it, the strange feeling in my chest grew stronger. Not fear, not anger, something deeper. Like a door inside me was slowly opening. And as that feeling spread through my chest, one terrifying thought rose inside my mind. What if the one we tried to mock was actually standing here with us tonight? My knees pressed against the cold stone again, but this time it felt different. The weight that had held me down all night was gone. The silence in the church was full, not empty. Candlelight flickered softly across the blackened cross, and I could feel a warmth spreading through my chest. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from something new, something I could not name. Adil sat beside me, his face pale, eyes wide, staring at the burned wood. The others were still kneeling, some crying quietly, some whispering words I did not understand. I felt their hearts beating like my own, heavy, slow, full of awe. The priest leaned forward, resting his hands on the floor, and looked at me. "Samir, do you see now?" he asked softly. I swallowed hard, tears stinging my eyes. I did not answer, but my heart did. It had bowed, without my words, without my consent. I had come to destroy, but I had been destroyed instead. The cross before me was black, broken, yet alive in a way I could feel deep inside. My mind raced, my soul trembling, and one question burned hotter than anything else. Could this truly be real?